Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of horror stories that you can listen to while you fall asleep. Before the video begins, let us know what time is it and where you are listening from. Also, if you have suggestion for next horror story settings, let us know in the comments. Now let's begin. Sarah had always been good with numbers, but the accounting job at Meridian Storage Solutions paid better than most because of one catch: the night shift. While the rest of the city slept, she balanced ledgers in a concrete building surrounded by rows of storage units. The first sign something was wrong came during her third week. She'd been reviewing invoices when she noticed Unit 237 hadn't been paid for in 8 months, yet it wasn't marked for auction. Company policy was strict, 3 months maximum before contents were sold. She pulled up the rental agreement. The tenant was listed as J. Morrison, with no phone number and an address that didn't exist. Sarah frowned. How had this slipped through the system? The next night, she decided to walk the grounds during her break. The storage facility stretched across 12 acres, with motion sensor lights flickering on as she passed each row. Unit 237 sat in the back corner, isolated from the others. Unlike the bright blue doors of neighboring units, this one was painted black, with no visible lock. She tried the handle. It turned easily. The smell hit her first, sweet and cloying like overripe fruit. Her phone's flashlight revealed a small, empty space except for a single wooden crate in the center. Fresh scratches covered the walls, deep gouges that looked like fingernails had clawed desperately at the concrete. Sarah backed away and locked the unit. She'd reported in the morning. But when she checked the computer system, Unit 237 showed as paid in full with a recent transaction timestamp. The payment had been processed at 3:17 a.m., 20 minutes after she'd left the unit. The scratching started the following night. Soft at first, like mice in the walls, then louder, more frantic. It seemed to come from the direction of Unit 237, though her office was 300 yards away. Sarah turned up her music, but the sound seemed to seep through everything. At 2 a.m., her computer chimed with a new email. The sender was jmorrison237@temp.com. Stop looking. Some things are better left alone. Sarah's hands shook as she typed back. Who is this? How did you get into the system? The response came immediately. I never left. The security footage from that week had mysteriously corrupted, but Sarah found something else in the old files. Newspaper clippings from 15 years ago, stuffed in a manila folder marked Insurance Claim, Unit 237. Local man missing after storage unit incident. James Morrison, 34, was reported missing after his family found his abandoned car at Meridian Storage Solutions. Morrison had been living in his storage unit following an eviction. Despite an extensive search, no trace of Morrison has been found. The storage facility's owner, Harold Krantz, claims Morrison was asked to leave multiple times. We're not a hotel, Krantz stated. People can't just live in these units. Morrison's sister, Linda Morrison Hayes, believes foul play was involved. Jimmy wouldn't just disappear. Someone knows what happened to him. Sarah's blood went cold. She remembered Harold Krantz, the previous owner who'd sold the facility 5 years ago. According to the file, Unit 237 had been permanently sealed after Morrison's disappearance. But if it was sealed, how had she opened it? That night, Sarah waited. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, her computer logged an automatic payment for Unit 237. She watched the screen refresh, showing the payment processor as J. Morrison, location, on site. She grabbed the security radio. Hello? Is anyone else on the property tonight? Static answered her. Sarah walked outside, following the motion sensors that lit up in sequence, creating a pathway straight to Unit 237. The black door stood open, though she remembered closing it. The wooden crate was gone. In its place lay a yellowed piece of paper with her name written in shaky handwriting. Sarah, the crate was never the problem. I've been waiting for someone to find me. Now you have. Some prisons don't have bars. Some contracts don't end with death. Harold made sure I could never leave. But I'm not alone anymore. Thank you for letting me out. The motion sensors began clicking off one by one, darkness creeping closer from all directions. Sarah ran toward her office, but the lights continued shutting down ahead of her, plunging each section into black. Behind her, she heard footsteps, bare feet slapping against concrete, keeping pace no matter how fast she ran. She reached her office and slammed the door, fumbling for her phone. No signal. The computer screen flickered, displaying the same message over and over. Payment processed. Welcome home, Sarah. Welcome home. The scratching started again, but now it was coming from inside the walls, and it sounded like 2 sets of fingernails. When David moved into the duplex on Maple Street, Mrs. Chun seemed like the ideal neighbor. She brought homemade cookies within an hour of his arrival, helped him carry boxes, and even left a spare key under her flower pot in case of emergencies. "I live alone too," she'd said with a warm smile. "We have to look out for each other." The first month was perfect. Mrs. Chun watered his plants when he traveled for work, accepted his packages, and never complained about noise. She was retired, she explained, and enjoyed having someone young around to help with occasional tasks. It started with small things. David would come home to find his mail neatly stacked on his kitchen counter, even though he kept his door locked. When he asked Mrs. Chun about it, she looked confused. "I haven't been in your apartment, dear. Are you sure you didn't leave the door open?" He installed a deadbolt. The next week, he found his laundry folded and put away. His dirty dishes were washed and dried. A grocery list in handwriting that wasn't his sat on his refrigerator, listing his exact preferences down to the brand of coffee he bought. "Mrs. Chun," he said gently, "I appreciate your help, but you don't need to clean my apartment." Her face went blank. "I've never been in your apartment, David. Why would you think that?" He changed the locks. But it continued. His bed was made with hospital corners he'd never learned. His bathroom was scrubbed spotless. Fresh flowers appeared in vases he didn't own. The thermostat was adjusted to exactly 72 degrees every evening, though he preferred 68. David set up a hidden camera. The footage made his stomach turn. Mrs. Chun had somehow gotten another key. The video showed her entering while he was at work, but what she did inside wasn't cleaning. It was memorizing. She opened every drawer, examined every item, took photos of his documents with her phone. She smelled his clothes, ran her fingers along his furniture, and sat on his bed for long minutes, just staring around the room. The most disturbing part came at the end. She stood in front of his bathroom mirror and practiced conversations. "Good morning, David. Did you sleep well?" "David, honey, I made your favorite for dinner." "Don't worry about work, sweetheart. I'll take care of everything." Each time, her voice changed slightly, becoming softer, more intimate, like she was rehearsing different versions of herself. David confronted her that evening. "I know you've been coming into my apartment. I have it on video." Mrs. Chen's pleasant expression never wavered. "That's impossible, dear. I've been home all day. Perhaps you should see someone about these delusions." "Delusions? I have proof." "Do you?" She tilted her head. "Because I think you'll find your camera has malfunctioned. Electronics are so unreliable these days." David rushed inside. The camera was gone. His laptop was missing too, along with the external hard drive where he'd saved the backup footage. He called the police, but without evidence, they couldn't help. Mrs. Chun told them she was concerned about David's mental state, that he'd been acting paranoid and making wild accusations. "He seems unstable," she said sadly. "I'm worried he might hurt himself, or someone else." That night, David lay awake listening. Around 2 a.m., he heard his front door open. Footsteps moved through his living room, down the hall. He grabbed the baseball bat he'd hidden under his bed and waited. His bedroom door opened slowly. "Hello, sweetheart," Mrs. Chun whispered. In the dim light, he could see she was wearing a nightgown that looked exactly like one his ex-girlfriend used to wear. "I brought you some warm milk. You look tired." "Get out," David said, raising the bat. Now, that's no way to talk to your wife. You're not my wife. You're not anything to me." Mrs. Chun set down the glass of milk and smiled. "Not yet, but I'm very patient, David. I know exactly what you need, what you like, how you live. I've been studying. Soon you won't be able to imagine life without me. I'm calling the police." "With what phone?" "I moved it somewhere safe." She stepped closer. "I also took the liberty of calling your office. Told them you were having a breakdown, that you've been acting erratic. They were very understanding about giving you extended medical leave." David lunged toward the window, but Mrs. Chun was faster than she looked. Something sharp pricked his arm, a syringe. "Just something to help you sleep," she said gently. "When you wake up, we'll start our life together properly. I've prepared the basement. It's decorated exactly like your bedroom, but more secure. You'll like it." The room began to spin. David tried to swing the bat, but his muscles wouldn't respond. "Don't fight it, honey," Mrs. Chun whispered, stroking his hair as he collapsed. "I know this is confusing, but love always is. I've been alone for so long, watching other people have what I wanted. But now I have you, and I know exactly how to take care of you." As David's vision faded, he saw Mrs. Chun pulling photos from her nightgown pocket. Pictures of him sleeping, eating, showering, living his life. She'd been documenting everything, learning his patterns, his preferences, his vulnerabilities. Perfect couples don't just happen, she said softly. They require careful planning. And I've planned for everything. The last thing David heard was the sound of heavy chains being dragged across the floor, and Mrs. Chun humming a lullaby as she prepared his new home. The interview. Marcus had been unemployed for 8 months when the email arrived. Hartwell Industries wanted to interview him for a position that seemed too good to be true. Excellent salary, full benefits, and they were willing to overlook the gap in his resume. The office building was older than expected, tucked between 2 vacant lots downtown. The lobby was empty except for a single elevator and a directory listing only Hartwell Industries, floor 12. Marcus Webb. The receptionist smiled warmly. Mr. Hartwell will see you now. She led him down a hallway lined with doors, each marked with a number, but no names. Marcus counted at least 20 offices, though the building had seemed much smaller from outside. Mr. Hartwell was younger than his voice had sounded on the phone, maybe 40, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. His office was pristine, no personal photos, no clutter, just a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets that hummed softly. Thank you for coming, Marcus. I know you've been looking for work for some time. Marcus tried not to seem desperate. I'm very interested in the position. Of course you are. Hartwell pulled out a thick folder. Before we begin, I need you to understand that this interview process is quite thorough. We believe in getting to know our candidates completely. The first hour was standard, work history, strengths, goals. But then Hartwell's questions became more personal. Tell me about your childhood fears. What's the worst thing you've ever done to another person? If you could erase one person from existence, who would it be? Marcus hesitated. I'm not sure how these relate to the job. Everything relates to the job here. Please answer. Something in Hartwell's tone made Marcus comply. He found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, his father's drinking, the time he'd let his brother take the blame for something he'd done, his recurring nightmares about drowning. Hartwell took detailed notes, occasionally asking follow-up questions that seemed designed to probe deeper into Marcus's shame and guilt. Excellent, Hartwell said finally. Now, for the practical portion of the interview. He pressed a button on his desk. The door clicked shut with a sound like a lock engaging. I need you to perform a simple task. Hartwell gestured to a second door Marcus hadn't noticed before. Through that door is a room with another candidate. Your job is to convince them to leave. I don't understand. It's quite simple. We can only hire one person. The other candidate has been here longer, but we're giving you a chance to make your case. Marcus felt sick. You want me to intimidate someone into withdrawing their application? I want you to succeed, Marcus. Your unemployment benefits run out next week, don't they? Your landlord has already served you 1 eviction notice. Your credit cards are maxed out. Hartwell's smile widened. We know you need this job. How do you know? We're very thorough in our research. Now, shall we proceed? Marcus stood to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but something held it fast. The door will open when you complete the task, Hartwell said calmly, or when you're no longer a viable candidate. Through the second door was a small room with fluorescent lighting and 2 chairs. A woman sat in one of them, middle-aged, tired-looking, with the same desperate hunger in her eyes that Marcus felt in his chest. Are you here for the job too? She asked. Marcus nodded, his mouth dry. How long have you been here? 3 hours. They keep saying I'm almost done with the process. She laughed bitterly. I lost my house last month. My kids are staying with my sister. I need this more than you can imagine. Marcus looked back at the door, knowing Hartwell was watching through the one-way mirror he'd spotted in the corner. The woman was everything he was, desperate, broken, clinging to this opportunity like a life preserver. What exactly did they tell you to do? Marcus asked. Get rid of the other candidate, she whispered. They said there's only room for one. They sat in silence, both understanding the impossible choice. Minutes ticked by. The air grew staler, more oppressive. There's no job, is there? The woman said finally. Marcus felt the truth settle in his stomach like a stone. I don't think so. They just want to see what we'll do. How far we'll go. The fluorescent lights flickered. Through the speakers, Hartwell's voice crackled. Time is running out. One of you needs to make a decision. The woman stood up, her hands shaking. I have children. I'm sorry, but I have children. She picked up her chair. Marcus grabbed her wrist. Wait, what if we both refuse? What if we call their bluff? What if we're wrong? Tears ran down her face. What if one of us really could get out of here? The lights went out. In the darkness, Marcus heard the woman sobbing, heard the scrape of the chair being lifted again. He thought about his empty bank account, the stack of rejection letters on his desk, the slow spiral of his life since he'd lost his last job. He thought about how far he'd fallen, and how much further there was to go. When the lights came back on, only one chair remained in the room. Hartwell's voice echoed cheerfully through the speakers. Congratulations. You've passed the first round. Please return to my office for phase 2 of the interview process. The door clicked open, and Marcus realized with growing horror that he was walking through it. The babysitter. Emma had babysat for the Caldwells 3 times before, so when Mrs. Caldwell called at 6 p.m. asking if she could come over immediately, Emma didn't hesitate. The family paid well, and 8-year-old Sophie was an easy kid, quiet, polite, usually asleep by 9. There's been a family emergency, Mrs. Caldwell explained when Emma arrived. We might be gone until very late. Sophie's already had dinner and her bath. She just needs to be tucked in. The house felt different that night. Usually warm and lived in, it seemed oddly sterile. Family photos were turned face down on the mantel, and the living room had been rearranged. Furniture pushed against the walls like someone had needed to clear space quickly. Sophie sat on her bed in pink pajamas, but something was wrong with her expression. She stared at Emma with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Hi, Sophie. Ready for story time? Sophie nodded slowly. Mommy said you'd take good care of me. She said you'd do exactly what I asked. Emma forced a smile. Of course, sweetie. What would you like me to read? I don't want a story. Sophie's voice was flat, emotionless. I want to play a game. What kind of game? Hide and seek, but with special rules. Sophie climbed under her covers, pulling them up to her chin. You have to find me, but you can't turn on any lights. And you can't call my name. And you can't leave the house. Emma laughed nervously. That sounds a little scary, don't you think? I like scary games. Sophie's eyes reflected the hallway light like an animal's. Start counting. I'm going to hide now. Before Emma could respond, Sophie slipped out of bed and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Emma heard her bare feet padding across the hardwood, then nothing. She counted to 30, then called out softly, "Ready or not, here I come." The house was completely silent. Emma started in the obvious places, behind the living room curtains, under the dining room table, in the hall closet. No Sophie. As she searched, she noticed more strange details. All the kitchen knives were missing from their block. The basement door, usually kept locked, stood ajar. "Sophie," she whispered, breaking the no-calling rule. "This isn't funny anymore." A giggle echoed from somewhere in the walls. Emma pulled out her phone to call the Caldwells, but she had no signal. The landline was dead too, the cord cleanly cut. She found Sophie's parents' bedroom door open. The room had been stripped bare, no furniture, no pictures, just carpet with dark stains that looked disturbingly fresh. On the wall, someone had written in what looked like crayon, "Emma will play with me forever." But it wasn't crayon. The writing was too dark, too thick. Emma's hands shook as she backed out of the room. The house suddenly felt enormous, full of places a small child could hide. But Sophie wasn't acting like a child anymore. Children didn't plan games this elaborate, didn't think to cut phone cords or arrange furniture. A sound came from the basement, something heavy being dragged across concrete. Emma crept toward the basement stairs, every instinct screaming at her to run. But she couldn't leave Sophie alone, even if Sophie was acting strange. Mrs. Caldwell had trusted her. The basement was pitch black and smelled of something sweet and rotten. Emma used her phone's flashlight, cupping it to minimize the glow. She found them in the corner. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell sat in chairs, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their eyes were open but unseeing. Between them, Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly while she braided something that looked like rope but wasn't rope. "I found them," Sophie said without looking up. But they weren't very good at hide and seek. They kept making noise. Emma's throat closed. She tried to speak, to scream, but no sound came. "Don't worry," Sophie continued, her voice still that eerie monotone. "You're much better at games than they were. Mommy and Daddy got scared too fast. But you kept looking for me even when you were scared. That means you really care about me." Sophie finally looked up, and Emma saw that her face was wrong, too pale, with dark circles under her eyes and a smile that stretched too wide. "The emergency was me," Sophie explained. "I got tired of pretending to be their little girl. But I like you, Emma. You're fun. You play along. Emma took a step backward, then another. Sophie giggled. We can't play hide and seek anymore, though. I already won. She held up what she'd been braiding, strips of fabric that Emma now recognized as pieces of Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell's clothes. Now we have to play a new game. What game? Emma whispered. Sophie's smile grew impossibly wider. Family. You can be my new mommy. And if you don't play right. She gestured to the chairs where her parents sat. Emma ran. She made it to the stairs before small hands grabbed her ankles with inhuman strength. She fell hard, her phone clattering away, its light spinning across the ceiling before going dark. In the blackness, Sophie's voice came from right beside her ear. Mommies don't run away from their little girls, Emma. That's not how the game works. Emma felt something sharp press against her neck, one of the missing kitchen knives. Now let's go upstairs and practice being a family, Sophie whispered. We have all night to get it right. The carpool. Rachel had been carpooling with the same group for 6 months when she noticed the detour. Instead of taking Highway 9 to downtown, Janet took the old industrial route through the warehouse district. Traffic's horrible on the main road, Janet explained, glancing in the rearview mirror. This way's faster. The other passengers, Mike from accounting and Linda from HR, didn't seem to mind. They continued their usual morning chatter about weekend plans and office gossip. But Rachel checked her phone. No traffic alerts for Highway 9. In fact, it showed green all the way downtown. The detour became routine. Every morning, Janet would take the same winding path through empty streets lined with abandoned factories and overgrown lots. The ride took longer, not shorter, but no one else complained. On the third week, Rachel noticed they'd picked up a fourth passenger. Who's that? She whispered to Mike, nodding toward the man in the front seat. Mike looked confused. Who's who? Rachel stared. A thin man with graying hair sat beside Janet, wearing a rumpled suit that looked decades out of style. He hadn't been there when she got in the car, she was certain of it. The man in the passenger seat, Rachel said louder. Linda and Mike turned to look, their faces blank. Rachel, there's no one there, Linda said gently. Are you feeling okay? But Rachel could see him clearly. The man was reading a newspaper, occasionally murmuring something to Janet that made her smile. His presence filled the front of the car like he belonged there. Janet, who is that man? Rachel asked directly. Janet glanced back, her expression puzzled. What man, honey? It's just us. Rachel's mouth went dry. Either everyone else was playing an elaborate joke, or something was seriously wrong. She tried to take a photo with her phone, but the screen showed only the empty passenger seat. The next morning, Rachel almost called in sick. But she needed this job, and Janet was her only reliable ride since her car had broken down. She got in the back seat, determined to figure out what was happening. The man was there again. This time, Rachel studied him more carefully. His newspaper was dated 15 years ago. His suit style was from the same era. When he turned slightly, she could see a dark stain across the left side of his chest. At a red light, Janet reached over and touched the man's shoulder affectionately. Her hand passed right through him, but she acted as if she were actually touching someone. How was your day yesterday, sweetheart? Janet asked the empty air. The man seemed to respond, though Rachel couldn't hear his voice. Janet nodded and smiled like she was having a normal conversation. Mike and Linda chatted behind Rachel, as if nothing unusual was happening. That evening, Rachel researched the route they'd been taking. In the newspaper archives, she found what she was looking for. 15 years ago, there had been a fatal accident on that exact stretch of road. A man named Thomas Brennan had died when his car skidded into a utility pole. He'd been driving to work downtown. The photo in the obituary showed the same face Rachel had been seeing in Janet's passenger seat. But the disturbing part came next. Thomas Brennan had been married to Janet Brennan. She was his widow. Rachel dug deeper. Janet had been in grief counseling for years after the accident. She'd been hospitalized twice for what the records called episodes of dissociation and elaborate fantasy. The last incident had been 6 months ago, right around the time she'd started offering Rachel rides. The next morning, Rachel confronted Janet before the others got in the car. Janet, I know about Thomas. I know about the accident. Janet's face went completely still. I don't know what you mean. He died 15 years ago. You've been talking to someone who isn't there. For a moment, Janet's mask slipped. Her eyes filled with a desperate, wild grief that made Rachel step back. He is there, Janet whispered. He comes with me every day. He never left me, not really. Janet. You don't understand. Janet's voice cracked. I drive this route because it's where we met, where we fell in love, where he's still with me. And if I keep driving it, if I keep talking to him, he won't leave me again. Mike and Linda approached the car, chatting normally. Janet composed herself instantly, the pleasant carpooling mother returning. Morning, everyone, she called brightly. Ready for another day? As they drove, Rachel realized the horrible truth. Mike and Linda weren't ignoring the man in the passenger seat. They genuinely couldn't see Janet's conversations with empty air, her affectionate gestures to nothing. They'd been accommodating what they thought was harmless eccentricity, not knowing they were enabling Janet's complete break from reality. And Janet's episodes were getting worse. She was spending longer periods in conversation with Thomas, sometimes forgetting to watch the road. She'd started bringing him coffee, leaving a full cup in the holder that no one else acknowledged. Janet, Rachel said carefully, maybe we should take Highway 9 today, just for a change. Janet's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, her eyes looked panicked. We can't, she said. Thomas doesn't like that route. It makes him upset. She was slowing down now, pulling over to the side of the road near the spot where the accident had happened. The exact spot, Rachel realized, seeing the replaced utility pole. He wants to get out here, Janet said softly. He says he's been waiting so long for me to bring him home. Janet unbuckled her seatbelt. Janet, no, Rachel said, but it was too late. Janet opened her door and stepped out into traffic, her face serene, her arms reaching for someone only she could see. Rachel screamed, but the sound was lost in the shriek of brakes and the terrible crash that followed. The same crash that had happened 15 years ago, and would keep happening as long as grief refused to let the dead stay buried. Jake had worked for Reliable Movers for 2 years, but he'd never been assigned to the overnight shifts until his supervisor called him at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emergency job, Tony explained. Family needs to be moved out by morning. Something about a foreclosure. You'll get double pay, but it's got to be done quiet-like. No neighbors asking questions. The address was in Meadowbrook, an upscale neighborhood where Jake had moved plenty of families before. But when he arrived at 11 p.m., something felt wrong. The house was completely dark, and his partner Carlos was already loading boxes into the truck with unusual urgency. Where's the family? Jake asked. Carlos barely looked up. Already gone. Left us a key and detailed instructions. Everything's labeled, just load it up. Jake had done plenty of late-night moves, but usually there was someone around to oversee things, to point out valuables or fragile items. The silence in the house was unsettling as they worked through room after room. In the master bedroom, Jake found boxes marked fragile, handle with care, that felt surprisingly light. When he shook one gently, the contents didn't rattle like dishes or glassware. They made a soft, muffled sound like fabric. Hey Carlos, what's in these boxes? Don't know, don't care, Carlos muttered. Just load 'em up. The children's bedrooms were worse. Everything had been packed hastily. Toys thrown into boxes, clothes still on hangers shoved into garbage bags. One room had what looked like dried stains on the carpet that someone had tried unsuccessfully to clean. Jake opened a box labeled Sarah's room and found stuffed animals, but they were all missing pieces, arms torn off, stuffing pulled out, faces cut away. At the bottom of the box was a child's diary. The last entry, dated 3 months ago, made his blood run cold. Daddy keeps getting angry. Mommy tries to hide it, but I can see the bruises. I'm scared he's going to hurt us really bad this time. I asked Mommy if we could move away, but she says Daddy would find us anywhere. Carlos, Jake called, but Carlos had gone outside to smoke. Jake was alone in the house with whatever story these rooms were telling. In the basement, he found more boxes marked important documents. Inside were police reports, hospital records, and restraining orders, all with the same names. Patricia Henley, age 34. Sarah Henley, age 8. Michael Henley, age 5. The restraining order was against Robert Henley, the husband and father. Filed 2 months ago. Violation reported multiple times, but never enforced. Jake's hands shook as he read the hospital records. Patricia had been treated for accidental injuries 6 times in the past year. The children had been brought in for suspicious bruises, and what doctors carefully termed behavioral concerns consistent with trauma. The final document was a missing persons report, filed yesterday. Patricia, Sarah, and Michael Henley had disappeared from their home. No signs of struggle. No note left behind. Carlos, Jake shouted, running upstairs. We need to stop. This isn't right. But Carlos wasn't in the truck. Instead, a man Jake didn't recognize stood by the loading ramp, tall, muscular, with scratch marks down his neck and knuckles that looked freshly split. You must be Jake, the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Robert Henley. Thanks for helping me clean up. Jake's stomach dropped. Where's my partner? Carlos? He's taking a little break. Had to step away from the job, if you know what I mean. Robert's smile widened. But don't worry. You can finish loading by yourself. Shouldn't take much longer. I'm not comfortable with this, Jake said, backing toward his car. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Robert stepped closer. My family left some things behind when they moved out. I just want to make sure everything gets disposed of properly. Can't leave loose ends lying around. Jake realized with growing horror what he'd been loading all night. The light boxes marked fragile. The hastily packed children's items. The basement that smelled faintly of bleach and something else, something organic and wrong. I need to go, Jake said, reaching for his phone. Robert was faster. The phone sailed across the driveway, shattering against the garage door. I don't think so, Robert said calmly. See, you've seen too much now. You've been through their things, read their private papers. That makes you part of the cleanup crew. Jake ran. He made it to his car before Robert caught up, but the keys weren't in his pocket. He spun around to see Robert dangling them casually. Looking for these? Carlos gave them to me before he left. Said you might try to bail on the job. Behind Robert, Jake could see the moving truck, nearly full now with boxes and furniture that told the story of a family that had tried to escape and failed. A family that wouldn't be needing their belongings anymore. Here's what's going to happen, Robert said conversationally. You're going to finish loading that truck. Then you're going to drive it to the address I give you. A nice quiet spot where things get disposed of permanently. And then, Robert trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Jake looked around desperately. The neighborhood was silent, houses dark, no one to witness what was happening in the Henley driveway. Please, Jake whispered. I won't say anything. I'll forget I was ever here. Robert laughed. That's what Carlos said too, right up until the end. From somewhere in the darkness behind the house, Jake heard a sound that made his knees buckle. A low, agonized moan that might have been human. Better get moving, Robert said, checking his watch. Dawn's coming, and we have a lot more cleaning up to do. When Jessica joined the medical school study group, she thought she'd finally found her people. The other 5 students were brilliant, dedicated, and surprisingly welcoming to someone who'd been struggling with anatomy and physiology. We meet every Tuesday at 7 p.m., explained Derek, the group's unofficial leader. My apartment has plenty of space, and we've got all the resources you'll need. The first few sessions were exactly what Jessica needed. They had detailed anatomical models, rare textbooks, and practice exams that somehow perfectly matched their upcoming tests. Her grades improved dramatically. How do you guys get such accurate study materials? Jessica asked during their 4th meeting. The group exchanged glances. We have connections, said Maya, the top student in their class. Professors who appreciate serious students. It wasn't until the 6th week that Jessica noticed the basement door. Derek's apartment was on the ground floor of an old Victorian house, and she'd assumed the door beside the kitchen led to a closet. But during a break, she saw Maya coming up from downstairs. Adjusting latex gloves she quickly threw away. What's down there? Jessica asked. Storage, Maya said quickly. Just old books and equipment. But Jessica had caught a whiff of something as the door opened. Something chemical and sharp, like the formaldehyde used in the school's cadaver lab. The next week, Jessica arrived early. Derek wasn't there yet, but the front door was unlocked. She could hear voices coming from below, the familiar tones of her study group members, but speaking in clinical, professional terms she'd never heard them use before. She crept to the basement door and listened. Excellent condition, fresh from the accident on Highway 12. No family to claim the body. Perfect bone structure for our orthopedic studies. And look at these organs. We'll need to move quickly. The preservation window is closing. Jessica's hands shook as she pushed the door open just a crack. The basement had been converted into a makeshift laboratory. Her study group members worked around a metal table under bright surgical lights, wearing scrubs and masks. On the table was a human body, not a medical school cadaver, properly prepared and donated to science. This was fresh, unmarked by embalming, and positioned like it had been placed there recently. Jessica watched in horror as her study partners methodically dissected the corpse, removing organs and placing them in labeled containers. They worked with the efficiency of trained professionals, discussing anatomical features like they were conducting a class. The liver shows signs of alcohol damage, Derek noted, his voice muffled by his surgical mask. Perfect for our hepatology review. I'll take tissue samples for histology practice, added Lisa. Another group member Jessica had considered a close friend. Jessica backed away from the door, but her foot hit a loose floorboard. The basement went silent. Someone's upstairs, Maya's voice drifted up. Jessica ran for the front door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. The electronic lock engaged with a soft beep. Jessica? Derek's voice called from the basement stairs. Is that you? You're early tonight. She heard multiple sets of footsteps coming up. Her study group emerged from the basement, still wearing their blood-stained scrubs, looking disappointed rather than surprised. We hoped we wouldn't have to include you in this part of our studies, Derek said sadly. You were doing so well with the regular curriculum. What are you doing down there? Jessica whispered. Advanced learning, Maya explained. The medical school only gives us limited access to cadavers. Old, preserved specimens that don't reflect real human anatomy. But we're future doctors. We need to understand living tissue, fresh organs, the way bodies really work. That's murder, Jessica breathed. That's dedication, Lisa corrected. Do you think the great physicians of history learned from textbooks? They dissected fresh specimens, studied living anatomy. We're following in the footsteps of giants. Derek stepped closer. We've been monitoring emergency calls, accident reports. People who won't be missed, homeless individuals, isolated elderly, victims of car crashes with no next of kin. We're giving their deaths meaning. The police. We'll find bodies that died in accidents, exactly as reported, Maya said. We're very careful about returning everything to its proper place after we're finished studying. Jessica realized with growing terror that her improved grades hadn't come from better study materials. They'd come from hands-on experience with real human bodies, illegal dissections that gave the group insights no textbook could provide. Now you have a choice, Derek said gently. You can join us fully, participate in real medical education that will make you a better doctor than any of your classmates. Or, he gestured to the basement door, we always need fresh specimens for our studies, and you've learned so much about anatomy lately. It would be educational to see how accurately you've retained the information. The other 4 members of the study group formed a circle around Jessica, their faces calm and rational, like they were discussing a difficult exam question. Think about it, Lisa said encouragingly. Medical school is competitive. We're offering you an advantage no other student will have, real, practical experience with human anatomy. All we ask in return is your discretion. And your participation, Maya added. Jessica looked at her study partners, people she'd trusted, people she'd shared meals with, people she'd considered friends. In their eyes, she saw the cold calculation of predators who'd found the perfect justification for their hunger. There's a car accident victim being brought to the morgue tonight, Derek said, checking his watch. A John Doe from the interstate. No family, no one to miss him. Perfect for our cardiovascular system review. He held out a pair of latex gloves. What do you say, Jessica? Ready to advance your medical education? When the Craigslist ad promised a 1-bedroom apartment for $600 in downtown Portland, Megan knew it was too good to be true. But after 3 months of searching and dwindling savings, she had to at least look. The building was older than the photos suggested. A converted warehouse with narrow hallways and flickering fluorescent lights. The landlord, Mr. Vega, met her in the lobby with a smile that seemed practiced. You're going to love it, he said, leading her to the elevator. Very quiet. The previous tenant took excellent care of the place. The apartment was on the 7th floor. As they walked down the hallway, Megan noticed most of the doors had multiple locks, deadbolts, chains, even some that looked like they'd been added recently. Security-conscious building, Mr. Vega explained when he saw her looking. We get a lot of single women. They appreciate the extra protection. Unit 7F was at the end of the hall. Mr. Vega fumbled with an unusually large ring of keys, trying several before finding the right one. Here we are, he said, pushing the door open. The apartment was perfect. Hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, huge windows overlooking the city. The rent suddenly made sense. Places like this usually went for twice the price. Why is it so cheap? Megan asked. Mr. Vega's smile faltered slightly. Well, there was a small incident with the previous tenant. Nothing serious, but it affected the market value temporarily. Megan walked through the space, checking the bedroom and bathroom. Everything was clean, newly painted, but something felt off. The windows had been painted shut. The bathroom had no ventilation fan, and there was only one way in or out, the front door. What kind of incident? A misunderstanding with a former resident. She was troubled, made some accusations that were completely unfounded. Mr. Vega moved to the window, looking out at the street 7 floors below. Unfortunately, she spread some rumors before she moved out. In the bedroom, Megan noticed scratches around the window frame, like someone had tried desperately to open it. Behind the freshly painted walls, she could make out what looked like small holes, hastily filled and covered. "Can I see the lease?" she asked. Mr. Vega pulled out a thick contract. Standard terms. First month, last month, security deposit. The only unusual clause is that maintenance requests must go through me personally. We don't use outside contractors. Megan skimmed the document. Buried in the fine print was a section about building security protocols and something about regular wellness checks. She started to ask about it, but Mr. Vega was already talking again. "I should mention, we have a very tight-knit community here. The residents look out for each other. Sometimes that means keeping track of who comes and goes, making sure everyone's safe." Keeping track? Just friendly neighbor awareness. For instance, I like to know when my tenants are planning to travel, so I can keep an extra eye on their units. And we have a buddy system for the single ladies. They check in with each other regularly. Megan felt a chill. What if someone doesn't check in? Well, then we know to investigate. Can't be too careful these days. The apartment was exactly what she needed, and the price was impossible to pass up. But as they walked back toward the elevator, Megan noticed that several of the apartment doors had small cameras mounted above them, all pointing down the hallway. Are those security cameras? Just a precaution. We've had some break-in attempts. The cameras help us monitor anyone who doesn't belong. But the cameras weren't positioned to catch intruders. They were aimed at the apartment doors, positioned to watch residents coming and going. In the elevator, Mr. Vega handed her his card. "Take your time deciding, but don't take too long. I have 3 other people interested, and apartments like this don't stay available." As they reached the lobby, a young woman emerged from the stairwell, looking flustered and out of breath. She was thin, with dark circles under her eyes, and she glanced nervously at Mr. Vega before hurrying toward the exit. "Excuse me," Megan called after her. "Do you live here? Could I ask you about the building?" The woman stopped, her face going pale. She looked at Mr. Vega, then back at Megan. "Don't," she whispered. "Whatever he's offering you, don't take it." "Sarah," Mr. Vega said sharply, "I thought we discussed your tendency to interfere with building business." "Tell her about Rachel," Sarah said, backing toward the door. "Tell her what really happened to the girl in 7F. "Sarah has some mental health issues," Mr. Vega explained to Megan. "She sometimes confuses her medication-induced hallucinations with reality." But Sarah pressed on, her voice rising. "Rachel tried to leave after the first month. Packed her bags, called a moving truck. But somehow her lease got extended. Then her credit card stopped working. Her bank account got frozen. And when she tried to contact her family..." "That's enough," Mr. Vega said coldly. "She's still here," Sarah whispered. "Apartment 4B. But she hasn't been outside in 6 months. None of us in the buddy system have. He says it's for our safety, but we're not safe. We're trapped." Security appeared, 2 large men who seemed to materialize from nowhere. They took Sarah gently but firmly by the arms. "Sarah needs to rest," Mr. Vega explained. "She gets agitated when she misses her medication schedule." As they led Sarah away, she called back to Megan. "Check the lease again. Read the fine print. And whatever you do, don't sign anything." Mr. Vega's smile returned, but it looked strained. "I apologize for that display. Sarah's been struggling since her accident. Head trauma can cause paranoid delusions." Megan backed toward the exit. "I think I need more time to consider." "Of course. But remember, good apartments go fast. And I'd hate for you to end up homeless when you have such a perfect option right here." Something in his tone made it sound less like friendly advice and more like a threat. That night, Megan researched the building online. She found a dozen missing persons reports over the past 2 years. All young women who'd rented apartments there and then seemingly vanished. No bodies found, no evidence of foul play. They'd simply stopped showing up for work, stopped contacting family, stopped existing in any traceable way. But their rent kept getting paid. Their leases kept getting renewed. And according to city records, they were all still listed as current residents. Her phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. This is Mr. Vega. I hope you've had time to think about our conversation. The apartment won't stay available much longer. I've decided not to take it. A long pause. That's unfortunate. I was really hoping we could welcome you to our little community. We take such good care of our residents here. The line went dead. The next morning, Megan found eviction papers taped to her current apartment door. Her landlord claimed she was 3 months behind on rent, which was impossible. When she called her bank, her accounts had been frozen for suspicious activity. Her phone rang again. Mr. Vega's voice was warm and helpful. I heard you might be having some housing difficulties. Lucky for you, that apartment in 7F is still available. And given your current circumstances, I'm prepared to waive the security deposit. All you need to do is sign the lease. Megan realized she was already trapped, even before setting foot in his building again. Amy's phone died just as her Uber arrived at the airport. She'd been traveling for 12 hours, and all she wanted was to get home to her apartment across town. The driver seemed friendly enough, middle-aged man named Dale with a clean car and a thermos of coffee. Long flight? He asked, pulling away from the terminal. The worst. Delayed 3 times. Amy settled into the back seat, grateful to finally be moving. I bet you're exhausted. Don't worry, I'll get you home safe. 20 minutes into the drive, Amy realized they weren't taking the usual route. Instead of the highway, Dale had chosen surface streets through industrial neighborhoods she didn't recognize. Is this faster? She asked. Oh yeah, much faster. Highways backed up with construction. This way we avoid all that mess. But Amy had made this trip dozens of times, and there was never construction on that stretch of road. She tried to check her phone's GPS, but the dead battery left her helpless to confirm their location. Actually, could you take the highway instead? I know it's longer, but... Trust me, Dale interrupted, glancing in the rearview mirror. I've been doing this for 5 years. I know all the shortcuts. The neighborhoods grew more isolated. Empty lots, abandoned buildings, streets with no traffic lights. Amy's unease grew as she realized she had no idea where they were. How much further? She asked. Almost there. Just a quick detour first. Dale turned into what looked like an empty parking lot behind a closed warehouse. Amy's heart started racing. Why are we stopping? Car trouble, Dale said calmly, putting the vehicle in park. Engine's overheating. Just need to let it cool down for a minute. Amy tried her door handle. It didn't open. The child safety locks were engaged. Let me out, she said firmly. Dale turned around in his seat, and Amy saw that his friendly demeanor had vanished completely. His eyes were cold, calculating. Here's the thing, Amy. Your ride isn't quite over yet. How do you know my name? She hadn't given it when she got in the car. Dale smiled. I know lots of things about you. Your flight was delayed, so you're tired and not thinking clearly. Your phone's dead, so you can't call for help. You live alone, so nobody's expecting you home at a specific time. You paid cash for your last 3 Uber rides, so there's no credit card trail linking you to this trip. Amy's blood went cold. You're not my Uber driver. Nope. I just wait outside the terminal for travelers who look like easy targets. Tired, distracted people with dead phones who get into cars without checking the license plate. Amy looked around desperately. The parking lot was deserted, surrounded by empty buildings. Even if she could get out of the car, there was nowhere to run. What do you want? Well, that depends on you. See, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've learned that people in your situation usually have 2 choices. They can cooperate, make things easy, and maybe walk away from this. Or they can fight it, and, well, let's just say that option doesn't work out so well. Dale reached into the center console and pulled out a bundle of zip ties and a roll of duct tape. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to decide how this goes. You can sit there quietly while I secure your hands, and we'll drive to a nice quiet place where we can discuss your situation further. Or you can scream and struggle, and I'll have to use more persuasive methods. Amy's mind raced. No phone, no way to call for help, no one who knew where she was. She thought about her apartment, her job, all the normal life she'd been so eager to get back to. Please, she whispered. I have money. I can pay you whatever you want. Dale laughed. Honey, this isn't about money. This is about opportunity. Do you know how many people disappear every year? How many missing person cases never get solved? The trick is choosing the right targets, people who won't be missed right away, who don't have strong social networks checking on them. He started counting down. 50 seconds. You really need to decide. Amy noticed that Dale's keys were still in the ignition. The engine was running. If she could somehow get to the front seat. 40 seconds. She pretended to slump in defeat. Okay, I won't fight. Dale's smile returned. Smart girl. Now, I'm going to come around and... Amy lunged forward between the front seats, grabbing for the gear shift. Dale caught her wrist, but she managed to knock the car into drive with her other hand. The vehicle lurched forward. You stupid. Amy threw herself against Dale's side, fighting for control of the steering wheel. The car careened across the empty lot, picking up speed. Dale was stronger, but Amy had desperation on her side. The warehouse wall rushed toward them. At the last second, Amy grabbed Dale's head and yanked it toward her, using his skull as a shield as they crashed through the building's corrugated metal siding. The impact threw them both forward. Amy's head cracked against the dashboard, and everything went white for a moment. When her vision cleared, Dale was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. The car had come to rest in what looked like an abandoned factory floor. Amy's hands shook as she climbed into the front seat and put the car in reverse. It took 3 tries to back out of the hole they'd made in the wall, but the engine still ran. She drove Dale's car straight to the nearest police station, with him still unconscious in the passenger seat. Later, the police told her she was the first victim who'd ever escaped. They found evidence in Dale's car linking him to 7 other disappearances over the past 2 years, all travelers who'd taken rides from the airport and never made it home. Amy never took another rideshare alone. The Mama's Kitchen food truck appeared in the downtown office district on a Tuesday morning, parking in the spot where the old taco truck used to be. By lunch, a line of hungry office workers had formed, drawn by the handwritten sign promising home cooking like Mom used to make. Lisa was one of the first customers. The elderly woman running the truck had kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, exactly what you'd expect from someone called Mama. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" Mama asked with a warm smile. Lisa ordered the daily special, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. It came out steaming hot, perfectly seasoned, and tasted exactly like her grandmother's cooking. Better than any restaurant meal she'd had in years. "This is incredible," Lisa told her co-workers when she returned to the office. "You have to try this place." The next day, half their department stood in line at Mama's Kitchen. Everyone raved about their meals. The portions were generous, the prices reasonable, and Mama remembered each customer's name after just one visit. By the end of the week, Mama's Kitchen had become the most popular lunch spot downtown. The line stretched around the block every day at noon. But on Friday, Lisa noticed something odd. Jerry from accounting, who'd eaten at the truck every day that week, called in sick. So did Michelle from HR and Tom from marketing, all regular customers who'd been praising Mama's cooking just days before. "Must be some kind of flu going around," Lisa's supervisor said when she mentioned it. The following Monday, more people were absent. Lisa did a quick count and realized that nearly a dozen of Mama's regular customers hadn't shown up for work. When she called Jerry's home number, his wife sounded confused. "Jerry? He's been sleeping for 3 days straight. I can barely wake him up to drink water. The doctor says it might be some kind of exhaustion, but his blood work came back strange." Lisa felt uneasy during her lunch break. The truck was there as usual, with Mama's cheerful face in the service window, but the line was shorter now that so many regulars were sick. "The usual, honey?" Mama asked when Lisa reached the front. For the first time, Lisa hesitated. "Actually, could I see your health permit?" Mama's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "Of course, dear. It's right inside." She disappeared into the truck for several minutes. Through the service window, Lisa could hear her moving around, opening and closing what sounded like heavy containers. When Mama returned, she handed Lisa a laminated certificate that looked official enough. But Lisa noticed Mama's hands were now wearing latex gloves, and there was a strange sweet smell coming from inside the truck. Not the usual aroma of cooking food, but something chemical. "Everything looks good," Lisa said, backing away from the window. "Actually, I just remembered I have a meeting. Maybe tomorrow." "Wait," Mama called. "I made something special for you today. You've been such a good customer." She held out a covered container. The sweet smell was stronger now, almost overwhelming. "I really can't. I insist." Mama's voice had lost its warmth. "You wouldn't want to hurt my feelings, would you?" Other customers in line were staring now. Lisa felt trapped between politeness and a growing sense of danger. "Thank you, but I'm actually not feeling well. I should probably go home." Lisa walked quickly back to her office building, leaving the container untouched on the truck's counter. Through the lobby windows, she watched Mama stare after her for a long moment before serving the next customer. That afternoon, Lisa called the health department. "We've been getting some complaints about food trucks in that area," the inspector told her. "Several reports of people getting sick, but the symptoms are unusual. Not typical food poisoning." "What kind of symptoms?" "Extreme fatigue, disorientation, memory problems. Some people have been sleeping for days at a time. And there's something strange about their blood chemistry, elevated levels of compounds we can't identify." Lisa's stomach dropped. "Are you investigating?" "We've been trying to, but the truck in question never seems to be there when we show up. It's like they know when we're coming." The next day, Mama's kitchen was gone. The parking spot sat empty, with only some greasy stains on the asphalt to show where it had been. But Jerry from accounting still hadn't woken up. Neither had Michelle, Tom, or any of the other regular customers. The hospital said they were in some kind of induced coma, their brain activity suppressed by an unknown substance. Lisa found an investigative reporter willing to look into the story. Together, they traced the truck's license plate through DMV records. It led to a fake address, but cross-referencing with other food truck permits revealed a pattern. Mama's Kitchen had appeared in 6 different cities over the past 2 years, always using slightly different names and registration information. In each location, dozens of regular customers had fallen into the same mysterious comas. "It's like someone's been experimenting," the reporter said. "Testing different formulas, different dosages." "Experimenting with what?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, they're getting better at it." The victims in earlier cities eventually woke up, but with severe memory damage. Jerry and the others, their brain scans show more extensive damage. The reporter published the story, warning other cities to watch for suspicious food trucks. But Mama had vanished completely, along with her mobile laboratory. 6 months later, Lisa saw a news report from Phoenix. A beloved food truck called Grandma's Recipes had suddenly disappeared, leaving behind 24 customers in unexplained comas. The owner had been described as an elderly woman with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands, who remembered everyone's name and served food that tasted just like home cooking. Lisa tried calling the reporter who'd helped her, but his phone was disconnected. According to his newspaper, he'd taken a leave of absence for health reasons. She wondered how many cities Mama had visited, how many people she'd used as test subjects for whatever she was perfecting. And she wondered what would happen when Mama finally got the formula right. The support group. When Claire's therapist recommended the grief support group, she almost refused. Talking about Mark's death with strangers felt impossible. But 6 months of isolation had left her desperate for any connection to the world she'd lost. The group met every Thursday at 7 p.m. in the basement of St. Matthew's Community Center. 8 people sat in folding chairs arranged in a circle, sharing stories of loss under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Dr. Helena Rivers facilitated the sessions with professional warmth. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of voice that made you want to confess everything. The other members seemed to find real comfort in her presence. "Grief is a journey," Dr. Rivers often said, "but you don't have to walk it alone." At first, Claire just listened. She heard about car accidents, cancer, sudden heart attacks, all the random cruelties that stole people from the living. But there was something oddly comforting about the shared pain, the understanding nods when she finally started speaking about Mark. It was during her 4th session that Claire noticed the photographs. Dr. Rivers kept a small table beside her chair with personal items meant to create warmth: a coffee mug, reading glasses, a leather journal. But underneath the journal, Claire caught glimpses of photographs. Not family pictures, but what looked like driver's license photos or headshots. "I've been having the dreams again," said Robert, a man who'd lost his wife to diabetes. "She's calling for help, but I can't reach her." Dr. Rivers made sympathetic notes in her journal, occasionally revealing more of the photographs underneath. Claire counted at least a dozen faces, men and women of various ages, all looking directly at the camera with the neutral expressions of official photos. After the session, Claire lingered, pretending to gather her things while Dr. Rivers packed up. The older woman moved efficiently, but she left the journal open for just a moment. The photos weren't random headshots. They were obituary pictures. Claire recognized several faces, people who'd been mentioned in previous group sessions as the deceased loved ones of current members. Claire? Dr. Rivers had noticed her staring. Is everything all right? I thought I recognized someone in your photos. Dr. Rivers smiled, closing the journal firmly. Just some research materials for my practice. Are you finding the sessions helpful? Yes, very much. Good. You're making excellent progress. I think you're ready for some individual work. Claire felt flattered. Individual therapy was expensive, and Dr. Rivers had implied she might offer some pro bono sessions for group members who showed particular promise. I'd like to try some specialized techniques, Dr. Rivers continued. Guided meditation, memory reconstruction, methods that help people process their grief more completely. The individual sessions began the following week. Dr. Rivers' office was in a converted Victorian house across town, far from the community center. The waiting room had no receptionist, no other patients. Just Claire and Dr. Rivers in a soundproofed room, filled with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. I want you to tell me about the last conversation you had with Mark, Dr. Rivers said, setting up a small recording device. Claire found herself sharing details she'd never told anyone. The fight they'd had that morning, the angry words that were the last things they'd said to each other before his accident. Dr. Rivers listened with intense focus, occasionally asking for specific details about Mark's habits, his routines, places he went when he was upset. This is very important work, Dr. Rivers assured her. The more completely you can remember Mark, the more fully you can process your loss. But after 3 individual sessions, Claire began to feel worse, not better. The memories Dr. Rivers pulled from her were becoming more vivid, more painful. And she was having strange dreams where Mark seemed to be trying to warn her about something. It was during the 5th individual session that Claire noticed the locked filing cabinet in Dr. Rivers' office. Through a gap where the lock didn't quite catch, she could see files with names she recognized from the support group. But they weren't therapeutic files. They looked more like dossiers, thick folders with photographs, and what appeared to be investigation reports. Dr. Rivers, Claire said carefully, how long have you been running the support group? About 2 years now. Why do you ask? I was wondering, do you keep in touch with members after they finish the program? Something flickered across Dr. Rivers' face. Some members complete the program, yes. Others, well, grief work can be unpredictable. What do you mean? Sometimes people aren't ready to let go. They become so attached to their loss that they can't function in the real world. In those cases, more intensive intervention becomes necessary. Claire felt cold. What kind of intervention? Dr. Rivers stood and walked to the filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder with Claire's name on it. Inside were photographs of her apartment, her daily routines, copies of her financial records, and detailed notes about her relationship with Mark. You see, Claire, grief is a powerful motivator. People will do almost anything to feel close to their lost loved ones again. They'll pay any amount, sign any contract, agree to any treatment that promises to ease their pain. Dr. Rivers opened another file. Inside were legal documents, powers of attorney, will modifications, property transfers, all signed by various members of the support group. Sarah signed over her house to fund her extended grief therapy, Dr. Rivers explained casually. Robert liquidated his retirement savings. Margaret gave me access to her late husband's life insurance payout. All voluntary, all legal, all in pursuit of healing. You're stealing from grieving people. I'm providing a service. Do you know how much people spend trying to feel connected to the dead? Psychics, mediums, spiritual healers, they're all frauds. But I actually deliver what I promise. Dr. Rivers pulled out a small vial filled with clear liquid. This is a mild sedative, nothing harmful. It simply helps people transition into the next phase of treatment. A specialized facility where they can focus entirely on their grief work, without the distractions of daily life. Claire backed toward the door, but Dr. Rivers was faster. The lock clicked. The facility is quite comfortable. Patients live communally, sharing their experiences, supporting each other through intensive therapy. Of course, they sign over their assets to cover the cost of care, but that's only fair. They're not patients. They're prisoners. They're people too broken by loss to function in society. I'm helping them find peace. Dr. Rivers approached with the vial and a syringe. You'll like the facility, Claire. Several of your support group friends are already there. Robert asks about you constantly, and I have someone there who's very eager to see you again. Claire's blood froze. What do you mean? Dr. Rivers smiled. Mark is waiting for you, Claire. You'll be so happy to see him." The syringe glinted in the soft office lighting, and Claire realized that Dr. Rivers had been collecting more than money from her victims. She'd been collecting the grieving people themselves, building some twisted community of the lost and broken. And somehow, impossibly, she claimed to have Mark there too.